yeah, we're talking about, and you know, we can kind of take it from the point of coming from theater and then doing on camera stuff, how there are things that it's, you know, some people are like, oh my gosh, it's totally different. And in ways it is, but instinctually there's a lot of stuff that's really similar as well. So obviously, right, if you were to get material for on camera, let's say, I'll just tell you a little bit about my sort of journey with on camera stuff, because when I was young and in school, like I was just, I just wanted to work, right? I think a lot of us, like, we're like, I don't know, we just love, like, you know, we love singing and dancing and acting. And when people say, well, what's your goal? Like, what do you want to do? And you're like, everything, a little bit of everything, right? Which is wonderful, but can sometimes be a little unrealistic, especially straight out of the gate. There is sometimes is something we need to focus on, right? So in my journey, you know, my first goal was sort of like getting a job, like a paid professional job. I wanted to work at a theme park. I just knew I wanted to like make my way up the ladder and just see if I enjoyed doing it. That was one thing as well. I was like, how am I going to feel doing the same thing every day? Because I've never done that before. A lot of times if we do shows, it's a weekend or this or that. So we know, you know, you think it's possible, but that first job is always tough. So for me, you know, my first job was Tokyo Disney. And so I did, you know, I had a really cool experience. I'm from a small town in Massachusetts. I had been on a plane maybe twice. And so that sounded really appealing. I wanted a unique experience. And I recommend that. I recommend traveling young. And just in general, just being able to say yes and just keep showing up at those auditions, right? So I did that. I was like, this is fabulous. I ended up getting my equity card in Florida at Disney World down there at Animal Kingdom. I did this show called Tarzan Rocks, and I was a dancer. I was a dance contract in the show. There were singers in the show. It was more of a pop rock style. And at the time, I had shared this with you guys the other day, some of you in this class, I was more of a legit soprano. So what I ended up doing was going to the in-house Disney auditions and singing, because they do that. Sometimes they like, anyone working at Disney, you can like show up, and it was like a 90-second thing. They were like, you can do 2 different songs. Or I do remember I sang, I don't know what I sang, but I sang something, and then I like did a back handspring. Like I was like, what do you need? I'll do it all, right? Only because as a kid, like my training was like all different, and it didn't really come together till later. Like I said, I was doing this dance contract, but I was like, guys, I can sing, but not in this show because I can't sing that way. Like, you know, and sometimes that happens. So what I ended up doing was subbing at the show, the Hoop-de-Doo Review, which is still around at Disney. It's like a very characteristic 6-person thing. So what cool training that was to do some different stuff like that. So I think my point of this is this was the first time I've always been willing, just like you guys are right now, to show up and do what I'm not really that good at to get better. And as artists, it's not our favorite thing. We want to do what we're good at. If we're a belter, we want to just like keep belting, right? If we're, you know, we like ballet, but we're not cool with hip hop, right? Well, the thing is, you have to take hip hop if you want to get better at it, right? So I definitely am such a, when I think back to those kinds of things, the things that scared me the most kind of showed me that's what I need to be doing. And I don't think everyone operates that way, but I will say that seems to be a through line with friends of mine that have done a variety of different things in their career. So I applaud you guys for showing up, because, you know, it's one thing to be like, oh, I can act, da, da, da. But it's another thing to go, well, there's kind of a science to doing some of this, especially to the audition, which we're going to talk about. I will say for me, you know, I moved to New York and I ended up doing Wicked. And after some months of auditioning, and I didn't have an agent at the time, it was from like an equity call. I did have my equity card. And the first time I went to the Wicked audition, I got cut immediately. I was like, what is this choreography? This is crazy. Like, what is happening? This is like very exactly, you all know it. I was like, I can't remember, like, you know, and they teach it fast. I'm like, how do people know this? I mean, this was like 2005 or 6, so the show had been out for a while, but it was relatively new in comparison to now. It's been around a long time. So I was just like, I'm confused and I'm sort of like turning red because I don't know what's happening and I'm cut. And that happened with Chorus Line too. The first time when they were doing, the first time I went in for that show, I was like, why does everybody know this? I don't know this. And cut. Like I didn't know what was happening. But then I was like, well, everyone seems to know this, so let me work on it. And that's what I did, right? That's what we do. I just want to be clear that none of this stuff was like the first time. Because all you guys hear when we talk is, well, I did this job and then I went and did this job. But you guys, let me tell you, especially with on camera, the number of auditions that I have done and didn't get or really wanted or felt excited because I had a call back, you know, like things like you take those little wins, right? So
I just want to say that
yeah.
after Chorus Line, back to LA, trying to do television and film and maybe do a Broadway show, I had 200 auditions. After I left and she was doing Christine, I had 200 auditions from 2000. I did Grey's Anatomy, third one in. Woohoo! Grey's Anatomy, I'm gonna make it. I was on Broadway. I got a big guest star. Who wants me? 200 auditions from 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, 2.5 years go by. How many auditions would you have liked to book as an actor after you just were on Broadway and you did a big guest star on Grey's? How many would you like to say you booked? Truthfully, honestly, somebody speak.
I mean, at least once a year.
At least once a year? No, I booked one. And it was Sleep to Live infomercial, mattress commercial, talking about the importance of sleep. I flew to Texas and I read on a teleprompter and I didn't even get a free bed. Okay. So it ain't countless and countless and countless. So I just wanted to count that in. And then you were out and you came to LA after me. Like I was out there first, then Alexis came. Then more and more Broadway people started coming in a way and wanting to do the acting. So anyway, I'll shut up. I'm still working on the script. Okay, bye.
Bye. No, thank you. Because I think it's just so important to hear that, right? Because it can be frustrating. So, okay, what else was I going to talk about? Just real quick. So with TV stuff, so I was doing shows and then, you know, and I had an agent and occasionally, I don't even remember, I just do some auditions is what it felt like. Like I was doing a show at night and then, and I started taking some classes at that time. Oh, I started taking improv. I really loved comedy. Like I was like, after doing Christine in a Chorus Line, I was like, oh, this works. Like, okay. And to be honest, I was always attracted to writers and comedians. I dated a comedian for many years in New York. And so I'd go to the shows and I'd sit in the back but doing stand-up never appealed to me. That sounded terrible. I'm also somebody who likes to be prepared for what they do. So improv to me was terrifying. I took it UCB and I had to pee the whole time. I was sweating in my chair and I wasn't good at it, to be honest. But I did it, right? And so, you know, always doing things I was a little uncomfortable with. So all of a sudden I did book something out of nowhere I did not remember auditioning for. And for me, I always kind of did what I thought was funny for these things, right? And that was cool. So I show up on set. I have no idea what's going on. Like, I was like, we're going to get out of here soon, right? I was not used to the waiting. I was not used to, like when you're on set, like, you know, rarely as a co-star or guest star or whatever, they usually do everybody else's coverage first and then they do yours, you know? So there's a ton of waiting and it's a lot about the hang, meaning like in that downtime, who are you meeting? Like, are you talking to crew? Are you talking to other actors? Like that's actually a huge part of the job. And in theater, some of my favorite stuff is backstage. So that was fun for me. I remember a couple of people that I met, but I was really blind. I really didn't know what was going on. I chewed gum in the first time we did the scene because I thought it was like good for the character. Audio was like, can you take the gum out of your mouth? I was like, oh yeah, sure. But to be honest, I was just all on instinct, right? And that can take you so far. What I've learned here, you know, from there, so that was my first experience. And then I ended up doing a show out here. I ended up moving to LA. and doing a show at the Amundsen, and I was kind of breaking up with musical theater for a while, mostly because my back was a bit not destroyed, but it hurt a lot. And if I was going to continue dancing 8 shows a week, it was going to continue hurting. So I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to switch gears. And I felt like being in New York, it would have been really hard for me to do that. I would have just kept up showing up and dancing. So moving out here, I didn't have a dance agent. I didn't do any theater. I only did TV and film auditions and got a theatrical agent, they call it out here. That's a whole other conversation about business stuff. But when they asked me, oh, are you looking, you need theatrical rep. And I was like, oh, no, I'm not doing theater. Well, guys, theatrical in Los Angeles is television and film, just so you know and you're aware. In LA, and Chrissy, if you're listening, they call it legit, and that's for theater, correct?
Mute.
That's a good one to know, just in case if you're switching coasts, that theatrical representation is for television and film. For theater, they call it equity representation, and that's on the West Coast.
I also thought it was called legit.
Yeah, legit on the East Coast. They don't call it legit here. That's really not something that comes up a lot. So just telling you how I was like, didn't know what was happening, went a lot on instinct, and got lucky a little bit right at the beginning. One of the first auditions that I went in for, I ended up doing. And it was one of those roles where it's on my reel, but the scene that they gave me had about 2 lines. And then it actually was a little bit bigger, which is a happy accident that can happen sometimes. So what we're going to talk about today is like you get an audition, and you look at the script and sort of how to look at it and get the most information as possible. The first thing that you can do, you can tell by a script whether it is and they'll tell you sometimes in the breakdown of the show, but oftentimes like for pilot season, you know, you're auditioning for a show that's not even out yet, right? So you don't really have a lot of information. If the show is out, definitely watch it if you've not watched it before, so you can get a sense of the tone and sort of what they're looking for. But 2 things to understand about a script, right? You know, you get a script for, if you've not read a lot of film and television scripts, some of them are accessible. You can, if there's a movie you like, you can look for the script and read it. And that's kind of a fun way to just get familiar with how scripts are written. But there's 2 things. So like say it's a short film or a short film or a feature film or a single cam, whatever. So it's a drama or a dramedy. Like there's a lot of stuff now that's cross genres, where it's not totally one thing. I mean, that's most things that are out now, right? Like, I mean, you think of like a This Is Us, which is, you know, it's a single cam, it's a drama, but it's funny sometimes. And, you know, there's a lot of flavor and life to it. But it gets really deep, or like a Grey's Anatomy, like Chrissy was saying. So those scripts, the one thing I wanted to talk about is if a script is double spaced. So this script of Giselle, if you can see it, can you download it? This one's actually not double spaced, but Chrissy, I did send you another one if you're able to upload it. And this is, the other one's from a multicam, and I wanted you guys to see the difference.
Yes, I can. I will put that in. Sorry.
Okay, cool. No worries at all. The other one's from a multicam, and the scripts they look different. So you can tell right away if a script is double spaced, it's from a multicam comedy, because really there's not any multicams that aren't comedy. So do you guys know the difference between that? If you're thinking a multicam comedy or a single cam comedy, like what would a multicam be? It's usually on a sound stage. It'd be like a Friends or a Seinfeld or things where it's just like they have those sets and there's a live audience a lot of times. And it's usually a very different feel. And the way the scripts are written is also very different. Because usually I've had a lot of friends like working on stuff where there's a famous director, his name is Jim Burrows, that's directed a ton of multicam stuff. He's pretty famous for like huge pilots and huge things. he actually doesn't even watch the scene, apparently. A lot of times he looks away and he listens. And you can hear the rhythm of the comedy. So a lot of times with multicam scripts, that's a whole thing, dissecting that comedy in a multicam script. And I want to talk about it just a little bit. We're going to just wait because I know Chrissy's going to upload it. But, so that's a multicam. So you can tell right away by looking at a script. So you get the script. Oh no, this says it couldn't. For me, it says it can't open.
Where do I, is the script going to be in my email?
No, it's in the chat.
Oh, okay.
But I'm not sure if you are able to.
Do you want me to screen share mine?
Yeah, we could do that. I think there might, sure.
Okay. Oh, Chrissy just has to enable screen sharing.
I'm gonna do it right now.
So we're actually looking at, or we can email it to you real quick, if that works.
All right, guys, hold on. This is a lot. Wow, not ready for this, and I just need your patience. So, Ishal, can you tell me, because I have a new computer that I'm trying to sync up things with. So that's another thing that I'm doing. So, how do I enable you to screen share?
So it should be, if you click share screen at the bottom, it's like a green logo.
Yep.
I can also do it, guys, if you make me host. I'm
disabled attendees screen sharing. So how do I?
Oh, you're on 2 cameras now. Let's see. Am I host? Can I? Oh, I can share my screen. Oh, host attendee screen sharing. That's what it says, yeah. Am I host right now, Christy?
Ishal, help me here, hon.
So you have 2 options. You can click the 3 dots on Catherine's like little Brady Bunch square and make her host for a second, and then she can share.
It's just showing pin video chat and pin video right now. Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
Let me go back to this. Hold on. I can go to
Yeah, just make me the host and I can do it real quick.
Who is the reclaim host? I'm the host now. Who was the host?
I don't know.
We're gonna
I think the other you.
The other you, probably.
I just did it.
Okay, so I'm host. I'm going to share my screen.
Sorry, guys. Thanks.
All good. Zoom's great.
No one's perfect. Okay, so I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm gonna head out. I mean, I'm here, but I'm just gonna.
Okay, this should work. I had to fix my settings on the desktop. Okay. You see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, fabulous. So, you see rude businesswoman. Good, so we're talking about multicams. So this is, you'll see at the top, Alexa and Katie, episode 204. And this is all I got. So I don't get the whole episode or anything like that. A lot of times there's things, they might cross it out and say FYI next to it. And obviously you want to try to read everything you can just to find out everything, everything you can about this scene. So, rude businesswoman, you know, and the breakdown for this character was snarky, rude businesswoman, snarky, always on her phone. And I think that's it. So there's this little scene right here. And you'll notice about this script that it is double-spaced, which means that it's a multicam. So if you've seen Alexa and Katie, it's on Netflix. There's a couple new Netflix things that are multicams. And this was exciting to me because this was the first time I've done a multicam. I've auditioned for many and I've been close to things. I've even tested for a multicam, which was an exciting experience. But I'd never been on one. And the reason for us theater folks why multicams are really fun is because you're essentially performing on a stage in front of an audience. There's a live audience. So it's that same kind of energy, and they tend to be a bit more broad. They tend to be like, you know, you can make bolder choices. So the best way to do any research on this, guys, is watching TV. And understanding like what's the difference between a multicam, what's the difference between a single cam comedy. A good example of that would be Modern Family, Parks and Rec, you know, those kinds of comedies where you can see it's only one camera at a time. A multicam will have, they're all in the scene, there's 3 different cameras set up and they cut between the 3. Here's the thing, multicam, there's usually more than one at a time, there's just no live audience. So that's the difference. But the soundstage aspect of a multicam, that's all big things. So those are big differences just to be aware of as you're sort of, if you get an agent and they start sending you out for things, you get something, you're like, what is this? Especially pilot season, because you don't know exactly the tone of the show. So for this, you can see, we know who Katie is. She's one of the leads. And so, you know, you watch a bit of the show and she's pretty bubbly and you can see it's her first day working at a cafe. I'm rude. I'm on my phone. I have to interject here. Okay, spare me the life story. Ted R is what her name tag says. That's a joke. Coffee with a pump of hazelnut. And then the last line is lock it in. So when we get stuff like this, there is a bit of, especially if there's a couple sentences in a row on multicam stuff, there tends to be a little bit of a rhythm to it. It doesn't have to be. When you're looking at a part, you can say, okay, she's rude. She's looking at her phone. I know that person, right? That's pretty easy. So it's kind of throwing it away, right? That's the other thing we have to, you know, you want to come from being a real person. So she only looks up at this line, at least for me, in my brain, sort of looking at it, where she looks up for the first time saying this, okay, spare me the life story. I have to pretend I'm reading her name. And Ted R is, I clearly know that's not her name. So that's a ching kind of thing. We have to really hear what that name is, because that's funny. So you have to like pick out these jokes. Coffee black with a pump of hazelnut, lock it in. So there's something called in comedy, especially with stuff like this, we look for different turns in the material. And this might be familiar for some of you, but basically it's, you know, let's say for she's exhausted. It's about, okay, spare me the life story, or whatever. Spare me the life story, Ted R. I'm looking at her name tag. Coffee black with a pump of hazelnut. Lock it in is sort of, lock it in, like to like looking at her, like get it together. Or I could put on a smile and pretend I'm really nice in that moment, even though I'm not at all. So a turn is a really bold choice to go against something that you just did. That's probably not the specific definition, but it's basically if I were talking to somebody and I was like, oh my gosh, you look amazing. And then I look at my friend and say, ew, that blouse is disgusting, right? Something like that. It's like a Mean Girls thing. That's a turn. So really specific choices, especially in comedic scripts, are really wonderful. And it's kind of just a technique you can look at. What's funny to me is that you can either look at a script and sort of dissect it this way and do it through how it sounds, or I think the smarter thing to do would be, who is this character to you? And coming from a really authentic place of how would you be, you know, standing in line waiting for something. Yeah, I mean, there's a couple ways, but knowing all of these specifics and knowing how to sort of dissect some of these scripts and say, oh, okay, I get it. That's the joke. That's where they're supposed to laugh. That's helpful to know too, because you got to land all of these jokes. And in the audition room, if you are auditioning with there's several people in the room. For comedy, they may give you a laugh. They may not at all. It might feel terrible. It doesn't mean it's terrible. That's a really, really hard thing with these auditions, especially for comedy. If it's a casting assistant and they're doing the tape, they're probably not going to do anything. They're not going to laugh at all. So you're going to feel like it was terrible, probably. And that's a hard thing also for shooting comedies. Anything other than a multicam, nobody's allowed to make noise. So that's a really, really weird thing to get used to, especially if you've been on stage. All of a sudden, you get zero reaction. And you have to expect that and not let it unravel you as you continue the scene. That's a hard, hard thing if you're used to stage, especially for comedy. So this has a couple scenes in it. There's 3 scenes. They're very, very short. Again, for me and with this part, I just kind of was like, it's not my job to be in my brain. You know, you're making the main character right here. Like, we need to feel bad for her, but you can also have some fun because it's a multicam, right? So what I love to do, and I talked about this last time, is I do love the characters. Like, I always think of in Devil Wears Prada, Meryl Streep, how she never raised her voice. She smiled sometimes, but what she said was horrible, right? Like, I always think that's a fun play instead of always being like, "Rah," right? I will say that filming this, though, I was pretty harsh. And looking back, I wish I do this with everything. I look back and I wish I did some different stuff, but ultimately, your job, when you do book a job, when you're lucky enough to be in that situation, your job is to be directable. So if they're not giving me notes to say, lighten it up, da-da-da-da, I'm probably not gonna, right? You know, because my job is to really just fulfill their vision and bring what I can to it. And that's a hard, you know, I often, the first day on set, what I used to feel is very, very nervous and very much like, oh, I could ruin everything. But what I realized, and we talked about this before, it's actually not about me. Yes, I am new that day, but what it's about is me showing up, standing where I'm supposed to, doing my work, knowing my lines, and ultimately giving them a solid take, similar to my audition, because I booked the job for a reason, and then being directable. And so often what does happen is this script is going to change a lot. With a multicam, what's really interesting is you do several days of, you do like a script, you do a table read. Like, this was a table read on Monday. On Tuesday, or table read on Tuesday maybe? I can't remember what it was. We rehearsed on Tuesday. I think I had Wednesday off. They were rehearsing other scenes. We rehearsed again on Thursday with all the producers and writers. And then we shot on Friday. So it was something like that. And rarely do you get that much rehearsal with film and TV. But this script did change a bit because they kept changing little lines. You just have to be ready for that. Great. And then this was this last scene. So usually in 3 scenes, you can show some different sides of the same character. Like this one, this part, she gets it for the first, the usual coffee black, pump of hazelnut. And then I'm like, the stakes have to be really, really high too. That's the other thing with comedy. Again, everything comes from a really honest place, but the stakes, it's real events with higher stakes. That's what makes things usually funny, right? So let's say like everything in Friends, like every date was huge, high stakes. Every, conflict that they had with neighbors was like high stakes. Like everything is just a really big deal, you know? And for this, like, how could she not know? Everyone knows Fridays are my fun day and I experiment. With multicams, what I actually really try to do as well is, again, because there's a rhythmic to it, to be honest, with rehearsing for stuff, I just say the lines over and over and over again. I try to make it my mouth, like really wrap my mouth around the words, because with a lot of comedy, it's pacing, pacing, pacing. It has to be quick. The biggest thing that can give you away of being a newer actor is to do comedy with the same pace that you would do for like an indie film where you're doing a monologue, because they're very, very, very different.
Guys, can I spin for 1 second? Sorry.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure you guys know that, like, you raise your hand if anything that she's saying, or you have a question that's coming up for you right there. Either you write it down and you ask it at the end, or definitely raise your hand in that moment and just be like, so you know what I mean? I want you guys to feel like this is a discussion and you can ask these questions as it's happening. Cool.
Yeah, exactly. And I can see your faces. I see you nodding sometimes, which I really Thank you. Because I know a lot of this information. Listen, I know it's not new for some of you, and for some of you it might be, but sometimes just hearing it again is really, really helpful. Because I will say for me, the biggest thing and the hardest thing is when you get comedic scripts or you get things that are wordy and you only have a day or two. That's the toughest thing, because to do this justice, it needs to be quick. That's a huge thing that can just give you away if you haven't done a ton of work. So it doesn't mean that you have to say the lines very quickly. It means you have to take the air out in between the lines, and the beats have to be really, really, really clear. So for example,
I have a question.
Oh yes, who's got? Yeah.
What is your memorization process for TV scripts?
That is a great question, man. So like, honestly, it's just, we talked about this the other day. It's me by myself in my bedroom or going for a walk. And to be honest, what I do is I will record the other lines on my iPhone, and I'll leave space for me to say my line. Because what
I guess, like, how quick, like, do you have the script and then you have to film it? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So what I usually do, so say I get a lot of times now with self-tapes, it depends. If you're not going in the room, sometimes you get it the day before for going in the room. But for self-tapes, there tends to be, in my experience, you usually have like a 2-day buffer, which feels like a lot in comparison to when it's like the next day. So what I've learned about myself only through class, not through actual real life, is that I need to, when I have the actual luxury of memorizing things, which feels like a luxury sometimes with some of these auditions, is that I'm going to be totally on it if I have it fully memorized that day before. If I am like, if I have a night to sleep on a script that I already really know, then I'm going to be golden. So a lot of times what I try to 2 days before. So if I get the script and I've not even read the whole thing, to be honest, I start memorizing the scene, even without reading the whole script. And maybe some people would say, like, if you get the luxury of getting an actual script, I usually start with that scene. I might like go through the script really quickly, but I actually try to wrap my mouth around the words and do it over and over and do that thing where I record the other lines as soon as possible. Because what I found for myself in audition, so first of all, just be off book. Just be off book. Even if they tell you to hold the sides, because when you get nervous, you might forget, or in between scenes, you might need a refresher of how the next scene starts or whatever. I mean, I do usually hold the sides. I have friends that don't, but I have one friend that doesn't, but she's also like, she's super established. She works a ton. I don't trust myself enough. And I've had it where I put the sides down in a room and I've forgotten, and that feels really terrible. Just because it wastes time. And yeah, I mean, all of this, you guys, listen, if you have horror stories, I have probably worse ones. Like, I have been in a room and messed up a tape like 3 times. I've forgotten. I've been in a producer session and forgotten where I left. They let me leave and work on it and come back. Like, you don't want to do that. But I've done those things. Not great. Wouldn't recommend it. But mostly at that time, I also, you think about it, how our brains work. Personally, I had a lot happening at that time. I was like, I don't think I put enough time into memorizing, and I was not calm enough, and my brain just did not show up for me. It just pooped all over me. Right? So that has happened. What I love is my goal with auditions. Listen, I mess up all the time, right? And I've messed up in the room. I can tell you with this audition specifically, since this is the last scene, I have to jump on her line a lot. So you really have to know what's happening. It's not a ton of lines, but what I really need to memorize is what the other person's lines sound like to me. So not what they look like on the page. I have to put the page away and I have to listen, because that's a different part of my brain, right? I find that that's probably the most helpful thing, is recording the other lines and leaving space in between. And what I do is when I'm reading it, I'll have the script in front of me. I'll still have the recording on, and I'll read my lines, and then I'll put the script to the side. and I'll go over my lines with the recording, and I'll see what I don't know. I learn what I don't know, and I learn where I continue to mess up. And again, if you have the luxury of time in this, you can drill it and drill it and drill it. We don't always have that. So I will also kind of have moments where I look at like where I can look at the page. Because the other thing about auditions, you guys, unfortunately or fortunately or whatever, if this helps you, to me, I end up kind of, I work within the framework of choreography, actually, for auditions. And what I mean by that, I'm going to talk about it after I put the script down. But so it's spilling all over the place. It's just one drop. Oh, like, so you're proud of mediocre. With these scripts too, you don't want to add anything extra, because a lot of these scripts, it's timing, and you don't really add any O's, any this, any that before the line. You just say the line, right? That doesn't mean you can't laugh in between a line. That doesn't mean you can't breathe. That doesn't mean you can't be a human, but you just don't want to add any words. And that's the good rule of thumb for a lot of this, because there are times where writers it's not a respectful thing, right? So we try to memorize like full on word for word, especially with multicam scripts, because it's so much about timing. Okay, good. So how dare you, and then there's no ending here, right? Do you see that? So I always give myself, if I don't have the last line, I always give myself a button. Call it a button. So in this one, so what did you say? I can't believe what she just said to me. Back off, or whatever she says it again, back off, I think. How dare you? I'm ready to say something else. I have to clearly write out or think of what I'm actually trying to say to her, because she interrupts me, right? So as an actor, you have to write the rest of this line for yourself. That's helpful. And then, you know what? How dare you treat me like this? And I think what my button was, here's what I did on this one. You know how you're having a fight and you're trying to say something, but nothing really comes out, and you're just like, I'm gonna go, like, I don't know what to say, right? So I had a moment of, and then I left the room. And that was, I think, what the button I did on this. I just gave myself an exit off the camera. You're free to do that, guys. If you don't have the last line in a scene, you do want to kind of button it up with something, just because it helps you as an actor. And I think it's sort of a rule of thumb, like, again, if you add, and this has happened to me as well, especially with a multicam thing, where I had a cute little button that I thought was hilarious and amazing. And after I did the scene the first time, the casting director, the notes were, they liked what I was doing. He said, get rid of the button. We don't like anything extra. Okay, thank you so much. I did it again with no button. Right. But, a lot of my friends that I talk to that work a lot, she's like, my one friend, she's like, oh, I always do a little improv at the end. If it's appropriate, I guess. But that's what's hard, going, when is it appropriate? In the class that I took for a long time on camera acting, I've taken many, but this was one I was in with a ton of working actors. And the rule of thumb was, if you don't have the last line, you can do something short at the end. That was our rule of thumb. And I think it's a good one. If you have the last line, there's no need to add to it, because that's usually what they've written on the script. So, okay. So what do I mean by, and this one, we can talk about this other, I just have rude businesswoman. I'm trying to think of where the Giselle script is. Okay. Okay, we're getting into, let's see. Chrissy has a Giselle script. I don't know why it's not on here. Let me just try to forward it to myself again, because this is a little clip that you'll see. And I just want to talk about a couple points when I mean, like, and I say the word choreograph, but people would just say you're giving yourself actions, right? Because every scene has actions, and on camera, and I'll show you real quick. Let's see.
Do you want me to find it, honey, and send it and put it in again?
Yeah, I just well, it wouldn't
Forward it to you.
Yeah, let me see real quick if forwarded it. Yeah, if you're able to forward it to my Yahoo email, that would probably be the best. And I'm sorry, guys.
I have a question while we're
waiting.
So I've like always struggled with I'm kind of getting it now after like hearing you talk, but the difference between single and multicam, like I've had friends say like, oh, my dream is to, book a single cam. And I'm like, what does that even mean exactly? So like, I know you said that it's not like an exact like black and white type of like science of it's this versus this, but so would it be true in saying that multicam is like a studio audience, like static sets that kind of stay, like Central Perk, The Friends,
Yes.
stuff like that? What about sitcoms like Parks and Rec or The Office? Because like they don't have audiences, but they're still.
Yeah, those are interesting because it's like that documentary feel. Modern Family's kind of like that too. So that is considered a single cam. And the way that those scripts are written as well, it's not I guess the thing with so popular like 80s and 90s, and there's still a ton of kids shows that are too, like Nick Jr., Disney Jr., like there's so many kids shows, and they're all on a sound stage like that, and they're written in this way that a lot of times it's like line joke, line joke, line joke, like they're literally written so specifically like that. So single cams, if we think of The Office, if we think of Modern Family or Parks and Rec, a lot of those shows feel very character-based. And also, I guess I would argue as well that there seems like there's room because a lot of the comedy can come from editing, can come from some improv, right? It's a very character-based, like, and there's awkward moments in them. And it's not that same sort of like, when we watch. It's a real different feel. Mm-hmm. So I guess as an actor, what's interesting is some people say multicams are really broad and single cams are really, specific and not quite so broad. I might actually argue that a little bit. I think there's moments of broad comedy in both, right? And also it doesn't mean that you have to project your voice all the time in multicam, although you need to know when that's appropriate. You're still mic'd and everything, right? So it's interesting. It really is sort of the tone of the show. And why tone is so important is because it gives you a lot of information as an actor, exactly sort of what you want to keep at the forefront of your mind and it being like of what importance. Okay, so I just wanted to, I don't know if you guys are able to pull up this Giselle script. So what happened was I emailed it from a different email. Here we go.
I've been trying to talk to you, and I realized I couldn't figure out how to do it. That's great.
Oh, okay, no worries. So
I've got your Yahoo account because I was going to email it to you right now if you need it still.
I got it. I just emailed it to myself. And the reason I want to talk about this is just a small co-star. And we're talking about like actions, right? I mean, in the other one, I was on my phone. So I held my phone. Props, right? The only props that they usually encourage are phones or that they allow, because props can just get in the way of what you're doing. So if you're in the room or whatever, even on camera at home, at home, I think there's way more, freedom, because you can really do a scene many times and make sure the prop's not taking away from what you're doing. But typically, you can use your sides and your phone to the point where people will even use their phone as a gun sometimes if it's like a detective scene, but typically you can use your phone as your phone. And you should, because we don't need to mime a phone. Sorry, go ahead.
Does that prop rule still apply to self-tapes?
Yeah, I think there's more freedom with self-tapes for sure, because especially if you're talking about a specific thing like a plant and you have a plant you can use, well, use the plant and look at the plant if you're holding it or whatever. I just think it's, you don't want it to detract from what you're doing. And in this class I think the other thing with this audition, I was a woman at a cafe standing in line. So I had my purse on my shoulder, because that's what I would have in a cafe. I didn't put my bag down. I put it on my shoulder, and I had my phone, and I was just looking at my phone. So that's appropriate. This is a woman that she'd have her little purse with her. So I'm going to hold my purse, right? And then there's other stuff where, if I have something I need to take out of my purse or put in my purse, I think it's things like if I have a little jacket or something that in the scene, a jacket can be used as a jacket, or it can be used as a blanket, or you can get creative, but it's with things you would be using. That was that's a good rule of thumb as well. That's kind of how I've always done it. However, huge side note, practice with your prop, practice with your bag, practice with your phone, because you'll get in the room and it'll get in the way and it'll take your brain away from the story. But I would say that's a good rule of thumb. So you guys are looking at this Famous in Love, role of Giselle. This is a big one you're going to get a lot of times going in for stuff. A lot of offices say this. Even if they don't say it, it's a good rule of thumb. A lot of them are like, don't wear perfume, because they're having so many people come in all the time. And some people, are sensitive and might even have allergic reactions. So this is a really short scene. It was only 1 page. Isaacson and Solier. So he, let's see. Okay. So this is Famous in Love. This show, I didn't know the tone or anything like that, but this was starring Bella Thorne, and it was a single cam. I think it was like a network show. That's also something to know, like who's producing it. Is it an HBO show? Is it an ABC or NBC or CBS show? Because those tend to be, broader audiences, more commercial, not as dark. And then sometimes like HBO, stuff like that. You want to look up who the creative team was and what they've done before, all that stuff. So this one, I knew these casting directors, and this role, it's kind of a young adult show. So clearly, chic, but with a militant edge, they say about this woman. Oh, here's the other thing. I'm 38. This was a couple years ago. I've always gone in for roles older than me, or not always, but even as a young in theater, I would get sides for the 60-year-olds. I'm tall. I have that's the look. It's not always been my energy, but I'm realizing I love it, and I age up constantly, and I'm not mad about it. So, just knowing that things start to happen, right? Like you'll be like, oh my gosh, like very offended. And then you're like, wait a minute, this is great. Because for me, I consider myself a character actress, and I look at, things on TV, and we always, we need all ages to tell stories. And, I find it to be wonderful that I, any role I'll happily age up. Anyway, so she's trying on dresses, and I'm like so annoyed with her. So what I love to do, and you can see this scene. Did I try on the Prada yet? No, wait, the Dior will accentuate your curves. She tries to be cool to me, and she's not. There's no beat written in here, but there's a beat here. So stylist must be like the coolest job ever, huh? And there's a beat, and then I say that just because, it would land more. So it's a really short scene, but how can we make this interesting? And I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second. Hi. So one thing I love to do, so here's some as we're, last couple minutes. Okay, so in the scene, if I were to, say the camera, I'm looking right at the camera right now. We have to look at where our eye line is. You usually look there just off the camera to the right or off the camera to the left. If there's 2 people in the scene, you can be talking to one person and then they say something and you're like, what are you talking about? And you can even watch them have a conversation just by moving your eyes, and then you can respond. And those are eye line is huge, and you have to practice it. Because if somebody's having a conversation, I mean, you can just stare at the one person, but if you're able to show that there are two people, here's the biggest trick in the book that I think makes it so fun. So for this scene, Giselle, it was like, how would she walk? Like, how would she, like, she's very, you know, it sort of can inform, you have fun with it. Again, I talked about play in the other class. And for me, I always used to do roles that are like, what? Like way up here and like, are you kidding? Whatever, like theater. That was like my, you know, because I talk here a lot. But now I'm realizing a lot of the roles, Giselle, she doesn't really talk up here. I mean, she could, but I think Giselle is more down here because she just really doesn't have time for anybody, you know? And I'm not really going to try very hard for anybody either. So it can just like inform your body. That for me, I often just go from there. Like I'll look at a piece of paper and I'll be like, I'll look at the script and I'll be like, what's on the page and where does my imagination take me? Who is she to me? Right? And all the fun stuff for me comes from playing a lot of times in my car or in the shower, saying the lines over and over and making myself laugh like an idiot. Because I always think I'm so funny. And then sometimes I'm like, well, this could not work, but I'll go for it. So, okay, the one thing I wanted to say to you is Giselle is talking to somebody and she's trying on clothes. So I have to make sure I'm looking at her like I would if she was trying on a dress, right? Right? Looking up and down at a person, like even if you're just introduced to them, like say somebody introduced me and she's like, this is my friend. I'm like, hi. It's really nice to meet you. I look them up and down. It makes them a real person. Because that's what we do in life, right? You're like, oh my God, I love your, oh my God, I love your, well, that's a little low, but, oh, I love your shoes, right? Or, you know, and so that was one thing I remember doing is taking the time to like, and it's the casting director or assistant and they're reading with you. So it feels funny because you're totally checking them out. Or if it's a two-person scene, oftentimes though, you just have to practice with a blank wall and see what that feels like of like talking to somebody and just making them a real person by like checking them out. If that's what the character would do, you know? Because what's so fun about playing characters is you're trying to be real people. And so the biggest thing you can do for yourself in all of this is just start watching people in life. And where do they, it's things you don't even think about. Where do your eyes go when you're talking to somebody? Where are your hands, right? Like how would Giselle stand? Oh, you know, I've been watching, I don't know if you guys have watched Schitt's Creek, which is a wonderful, I have a hard time getting into
talking about it. Everybody's talking about it.
Oh my God. You need to watch it because at first I think people were like, ew, everybody's talking about it. You don't want to watch it. And then cut to just give yourself like 4 episodes and you'll like be in love with these characters. They're horrible people at first. And of course, Katherine O'Hara is incredible. And she's such a weirdo, right? Like what's special about Katherine O'Hara? She's a weirdo. Like the way she has this accent where she's like, I used to be an actress and I enunciate words, but I'm also not British. And I use words, but I don't always know what they mean. And like stuff like that, where you're like, this lady is just crazy and we are in love with her because of it. Because people are crazy. People are crazy. Right? So it's always trying to think like with Giselle, like what did she do that, oh, and I remember in the audition, I was going to say Alexis from Schitt's Creek. She's always like, her hands are always like here. This is like what she's like, I know, but like, I was just thinking like, this is like, I don't know why, like, that's just what she does. And maybe that as the, you know, actress who plays her, maybe that's like her thing, but you'll find that characters, if you have a hard time, right? We always say all the information is on the script. It is. But what information is coming from you and your play about it? Because your job is to take the material and wash it through yourself and give them a great option. That's it. And then say bye and be like, see you later, thank you so much. I'm going to come in the door. I'm going to give you a really fun option. And that's it. And I will say with this, I have a tendency now, which is kind of hilarious. But she definitely was like, can you just like play her a little lighter, just like not so aggressive.
Who said this? Who said this?
Like, I remember in this audition, she was like, just not, because on the page, she's very aggressive, right? And again, we talked about this with songs of how to show different colors. So again, in this audition, it's a good rule of thumb. So this woman is very just like, ew, you're terrible. Like, you don't know anything about fashion, and I do. And I'm not going to entertain your questions. And that's like her whole thing. But is there a way we can find to put a smile on her face at some point? It's a terrible no. And I said this last time, but for me, it works. And the reason is it's because of taking class and watching beautiful work from other people that I had this like revelation. This woman was a Yale grad school actress. She's incredible. And she was doing a really sad scene from a show where it's like, where they're interviewing the victim's family, one of those, right? And she's tortured and sad and finding out information in the moment. And as she's remembering somebody, she smiles a little bit because it's like so hard to, and I was like, oh, on the page, I would never think to do that because the scene is a horrible scene. It's horribly dark. But there's so many colors in everything. So I had to find a way to like lighten up Giselle a little bit. And so even on the page with all those scenes, we want to add in, you know, and that's work we prepare with. But then in the room, when they give you notes, I recently had like a voiceover audition where they said, lean into the comedy. And I was like, oh, I'm trying. And really what it made me do was just kind of like, I don't know, what I realized I should have done at the beginning is I wished I had come up with a couple alternative lines at the end for myself, thinking back, and a whole new approach. I was tied to, because it was a callback, I was into what were the intentions I had during the audition. And so I want to recreate that for them. But I didn't give myself enough room or permission to already have had a couple choices at my fingertips. And that's what I would have done differently, just for myself. So that's an interesting one for you. You know, I usually come in for myself, I try to do the best take as possible, which means I've fallen in love or I'm into one way of doing it. But sometimes they want something else. And so a good way, you know, again, I tell myself, like, I wish now, and when I'm in that scenario again, I'm certainly going to come up with some other options and just have those in my pocket. And that was a voiceover thing for a series regular, which means that they want to get to know who you are. That's the other thing. This conversation could go on and on and on. And the most helpful thing would be to do the work with each other. But I'm hoping I gave you a couple things to ponder, a couple of things to think about when you look at a script. That the other nugget is that with each character, there's usually one line, a couple words that you're like, oh, that's what this person says, right? Like it could be with Giselle. She says something to her about accentuating her curves, which is a little bit of a dig, I think, right? Or whatever. I mean, you know, you're trying to pick out like what word, or how does she say this word, or how does he, what little line, like there's usually in a script, one little nugget that you can say, there they are, you know? And that's really helpful. But I hope that the eye line, that kind of stuff, and the best way to do it is practice. So if you are working on some self-tapes right now or anything like that, it's a great way to see what you're doing.
Thank you, Katherine, so much. We're out of time. I know Rachel had to like run off to a coaching, but you guys, thank you so much for being here, and thank you, Katherine, for all that knowledge. I appreciate it so much for sharing your tips and the stuff that you've done. You guys, I put in, and I can't do it. Can you do it? You're the host, just to leave them with your reel, just because of time.
Oh.
I copied and pasted it in yours. Can you copy and paste it and put it to everybody?
Yeah, I should be able to.
That way you guys
I
can
mean-
see the first part of it. Her first part of her reel is that scene that we just, the Giselle scene.
Yeah.
But thank you guys. If you guys want to say anything or any last like just thank yous, or if you guys have any questions for us, please. We brought in, this is Alexis and I normally are the ones teaching these classes, but we brought in Katherine this week, and we're starting to bring in other outside people as we grow. And so yeah, just say
Thank you so much.
Thank
Do
you.
you guys think you'll still be doing Zoom classes even though like things are starting to open back up, or?
I think so. We're in the process of talking about it, Isha. We just don't know right now. We're trying the BAC studios right now. We know it's going to take time to build. We'd like for it to be, because we like that it's easy access for anybody and everybody, and we're keeping the prices pretty low so that other people can come in. But we're just trying to figure out how to get it out there. So,
Would you guys be interested? I'm just going to speak for Chrissy for a minute. Would you be interested to do like an on-camera, more of these acting ones where you're doing the work?
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, I feel like for musical theater, what a cool, beautiful sort of like skill to be learning while we're Zooming, because it's almost easier to do it on Zoom.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, we always we've been coaching privately with whatever, but this is our first time deciding to do studios online, and it was kind of like this schedule was going to be like one acting for camera class a week, one audition mindset week, one acting for song, and then 3 dance classes. But it just is a lot right now when we don't really have enough people coming in to sustain. And it's usually Alexis and I doing the classes because it's our baby. Katherine has been amazing, and we want to bring her in, but we want to bring in our people, but we want to do it right, and I can't be asking other. So like our T for 2 chats are all fun and free, and that's just an amazing experience. So if you haven't caught up with any of those are pretty special and beautiful. And Katherine, we didn't get ours recorded, which we probably have to do again because it's just not in the vault. Katherine and I did it right in the beginning before we knew how to record it. So that's a long answer, Ishel, to I don't quite know. We're working on it. We want to keep it. Alexis is like, she loves it. We love it. We love the idea of having something ongoing, a presence with us. And then obviously you can always do our mentorship program, which we have right now, 4 of the people in this class were our mentorship program. So they get these classes included in their mentorship with a month with us. So we're just, this is our baby. This is our legacy. We want to keep teaching and passing it on and trying to find the right way to do it. So I don't know if that means just keep doing it and then build it slowly, because we don't have any marketing. It's still just me and Alexis. So we're trying. Just know we're trying.
Yeah. Because especially for Lindsay and Ishel, and Lindsay, you've been in New York for a long time. Are you auditioning for stuff, or where are you at with TV and film?
No, I honestly haven't really looked at TV and film since I left LA, which is probably why Ishel was like, take the class with me. It's something that I'm definitely even more interested in than I was when I was at this. So.
Well, here's what I would say to you is like, make some self-tapes. Like, get some, there's a lot of on Actors Access and stuff. There's scenes, because they were doing a lot of open like calls and stuff. And I know we have to end, but I just, kudos to you for like showing up and just kind of talking about it and being like, oh yeah, that sounds fun. So like get a script and have it be a character that's never been played before, as opposed to theater, right?
Yeah.
And like, what would you do with it and make it interesting and entertaining for you? And what do and it is, to me, that's such a fun part of it, But yeah, for everybody kind of being introduced to this is stuff I had no clue about, that eyeline thing, and just practice. If you have time, if you have a night, put a monologue on tape, and just see. Yeah, why not?
Rachel's not on here right now, but we're doing V for Vendetta. Monologue from V for Vendetta from a film. It's just all play. It's all like what she's talking about. So I'm glad that I love to see that you guys talk about community,
Yeah.
right? Like, come on. You guys started at AMDA your first semester in LA? And she's like, come on, come take a class with me. You guys, it never stops. The learning doesn't stop, right? And Michelle's teaching, and I love that. And I taught her. Like, it's just cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
So awesome, you guys.
Awesome.
Thank you again, Catherine. You guys say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
And we'll see you guys tomorrow night. If you guys decide, just let me know. Okay.
All right. Take care, you guys. Stay healthy.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.